My name is Claire Blaustein, and until 12:03 a.m. on March 1st, I worked for 18F, which is a part of GSA, as a service designer. My work in the federal government started, actually, though, in 2012. My first job title officially was secretary. My position description had not been updated since 1976, and so didn't say I had to use a computer, but did specify that I should use a mimeograph machine. I never actually found one in my years in that job, but I stayed in the federal government anyway, and I worked for a series of acronyms, including IRS, HHS, NCI, LOC, and then, GSA. I wish I had some big story of something I built that made ordinary citizens' lives day-to-day so much easier. It would certainly make my current forced job search simpler if I did have that story, but I don't. Most of my work throughout my career in the federal government has really been focused on making feds' lives easier, making their jobs day-to-day more effective. So at the beginning, some of that was teaching my colleagues to properly use Microsoft Office, but later it was plain language training, accessibility standards, how to write for mobile devices, how to use the CMS properly. And as it continued, it got a little bit bigger, and I really started looking at fences. And when I say fences, I mean them in terms of Chesterton's fence, which comes from a book from 1929 by a man named Chesterton, who has a passage. And it says, "There exists in such a case a certain institution or law, let's say for the sake of simplicity, a fence or gate erected across a road. The more modern type of reformer goes gaily up to it and says, 'I don't see the use of this, let us clear it away.' To which the more intelligent type of reformer will do well to answer, 'If you don't see the use of it, I certainly won't let you clear it away. Go away and think. Then when you come back and tell me what you do see the use of it, I may allow you to destroy it.'" This has been coming to mind a lot lately. As a story and example of this, my first project with 18F was at the Department of Justice. And there is a concept called a DJ number. It identifies a case, it's written on file folders and on big boxes of evidence. It keeps everything together. It also was being used in a piece of technology, a case management system for one of the divisions, and it was the primary key on every record. But those records weren't all cases. Some of them would never see a courtroom. They were outreach efforts or contacts with the public. So you had hundreds and hundreds of thousands of these that had DJ numbers, which meant that they had to go through certain procedures. They needed extensive closing memos. They needed a lot of record keeping, work that was way more complex than the actual thing provided. Those strictures, those requirements made sense if it was a case, if it was something that had been litigated over decades. But it didn't make sense here. So the requirements themselves were necessary. The fence was helpful. It just needed to be moved a little bit. We needed to apply the number and its requirements only when needed and save people the time and effort when it wasn't. And there was no way we could have learned this by just looking at the tool. Nothing in the 600 tables in the database or 20-year-old documentation would have actually let us understand where this was being used and how it could be done better. The only way to do that was by talking to the people who provide the service, the ones who do the work every day. And that's my favorite part of my job. I get to talk to people and understand what they do. And I am most effective when they realize and understand that I want to understand their work in all of its complexity, in all of its stressors, in all of its complications. I want to know what the fences were there for, when they've changed, which ones have barbed wire, which ones have gotten repurposed as clotheslines. I want to understand those things, and then I can do something effective to make their lives better. I want to jump back to my pin. If you were counting at the beginning, I haven't worked for the federal government for 15 years. My anniversary of 13 years was recently. And so why do I have this pin? In a salary negotiation that I did, I briefly was a contractor, came back to the government. I was given a non-standard service credit, which basically said, oh, we're going to say you started work in 2009 so that you are that much closer to accruing 8 hours of leave per pay period. At the time, that was still 3 years off, so I didn't really think much about it. But when I got to GSA, that is the date that they use as the service computation date for anniversaries. So one random day, I started getting a bunch of Slack messages congratulating me on 15 years of service. And then I got a certificate and a pin in the mail in a big unmarked envelope. And in this case, the consequences of that weren't huge. But in other cases, they could be a lot worse. It's something I wear now to remind me of how easy it is to assume that we know what a piece of information can and cannot be used for, that we understand what it's doing there and whether it's useful or not. And I got a pin, but somebody else, maybe it's that a contract that we need got canceled, or a scientist who was doing something important got fired, or someone who gets Social Security has to go and prove that they're not actually dead like the government says they are. Those are fences that are there for reasons. And so I still wear it to remind myself to be that intelligent reformer and to not take down fences unless I have actually talked to the farmers who need them.